Sorry for barking at everybody on this app the last few days, but I'm just really, really concerned, and I feel like you all should be concerned too, regardless if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Um, I'm trying not to yell on this app, but I mean, I'm a retired special education teacher, so I have a traumatic brain injury. I went to school to become a special ed teacher. I was a special ed teacher for almost 10 years, you know what I mean? And I understand that there are a lot of people that, whatever, they don't like special education. Either they had an unsatisfactory experience while they were in special education, or, it's a parent or a guardian who had a deeply unsatisfying experience. What I can tell you is that if you remove special education law, if there is no federal law governing special education services, there are going to be millions of kids who are going to be expelled from school for a variety of different reasons, or they will just simply be denied access. The only thing that compels school administrators to do anything for children with disabilities, and I'm talking about, this is the problem with special education, is that it's a huge umbrella term, right? So, there's lots of different categories that kids can qualify under. There's learning disabilities, there's emotional disabilities, there's certain cognitive or comorbid conditions, intellectual disabilities. There's a whole list, Then there are like physical impairments that students have, blind, deaf, you name it. And all of that stuff is covered under IEDA. It's one big law. And I think the reason it's so difficult and is that it's such a complicated process to get through. But if you're a parent, and you have a child with a disability, that child under IEDA, under special education law, has access to a public education school. The federal government will not allow state and local governments to deny access to children. And it's up to the local school district in that school to find an appropriate place for education for that child. That's what the law requires them to do. It's complicated, it's nuanced, it's frustrating, I understand that, but you can imagine working with children, it is a process. It is a long, lengthy process that we sort of have to go through to make sure that we are providing a free, appropriate public education for those kids. That's a lot. It's a mouthful. But I did that for about 10 years. I work with children with intellectual disabilities, autism, ADHD, learning disabilities. I work with kids with comorbid conditions. I work with kids with like cerebral palsy, children that have vision impairments, and especially kids with ADHD and emotional disabilities. Those are the kids that are really going to be impacted by this because, listen to me very carefully. There are many stressed out school administrators in this country who, and I know this because I sat in meeting after meeting after meeting with these folks who, if they could, they would simply remove those children from the classroom, the kids that are disruptive, the kids with the behavior problems. And the only thing that forced the school district to do something for those children was the fact that they had an IEP. That's it. And if you have a child with, say, Down syndrome, and you might think, well, my kid will still be able to. No, they won't. No, they won't. If there's no money, if there's no requirement to provide those children access to a classroom, that's it. They're done. You're as a parent, you'll probably, it's up to the state, I guess. The state will have to come up with a way for you to educate your child. It's going to be a 50-50 states, a 50 states random. Whatever state you move to determines what kind of special ed programs your kids are going to get access to. You can imagine how deeply discriminatory this is going to get very, very quickly. Some states, I'm sure, like California, your blue states will have wonderful special education laws. And then you're going to have states like Alabama, Mississippi, Arizona, Texas, all of your southern states, Alaska, another sort of crazy red state, you know what I mean? That just, they do not provide resources for special education students. I know that because I worked in a red state for years. And I would go to the state legislature and I would advocate for better special education laws. And the problem is every time I would go there to the state legislature, it was always a different group of legislators every single time because they rotate every couple of years. So, every 2 years, it was like there's a whole new group of people that we would have to start scratch from and explain, well, this is what special ed is. And, these are why we need more resources, yada, yada, yada. And it was just, we got nowhere with it. You know what I mean? Like we could never convince our state legislators to give us additional money. And their excuse was always, well, you get money from the federal government. It's a federal program. If there's no federal money coming to these schools, You think that those local school districts are going to do anything with those children? Absolutely not. This is the excuse those administrators have been looking for, and I'm not saying they're mean, you know what I mean, or horrible, rotten people. I get it. Some of these children have, when you are a child coming from, say, a diverse or difficult background, you're going to bring that trauma into the classroom. And it is a lot. It's a lot for the teacher. It's a lot for the students. It's a lot for the special education folks. It's a lot to absorb that and to be that kind of patient, to give those children who just stretch us to our limits and push every little button that we have. Oh, yeah. Oh, kids are masters at doing that, by the way, especially your kids with emotional disabilities. Because those kids, I swear to God, they understand. It's a kind of genius, you know what I mean? When I think of kids with like intellectual disability, any kind of cognitive based disability, so like an emotional disability, intellectual disability, learning disability, it's a hidden genius. There's a gem in there, you know what I mean? Like these are your genius students, whether they realize it or not. Even kids with intellectual disabilities, there is a gem and a genius to it that most people, unless you work with those students, you don't see it. But because I worked with them every single day, I saw it. And those kids with emotional disabilities, they are brilliant. They have this super high emotional IQ, and they are just able to pierce into your being and figure out exactly what they need to do to press your every single button you have. And if you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know your children better than anybody else could. It's just fascinating and interesting, but we need to provide patience. I mean, that's what special education law affords us, patience. You have to be incredibly patient with children, incredibly patient with parents. It requires constant, consistent communication. And if you remove special education law, you do away with all that. Why aren't we talking about how we can leverage technology to improve special education services? Why do we have a president in charge right now who simply wants to gut this, throw it back to the states where God only knows what your state legislators are going to do? Like I said, some states are going to be very responsive. Your red states, no. And if you think the blue states are going to continue to subsidize the red states, that's not going to happen under Trump's America. Are you kidding me? California should keep all their money. If I'm California, I'm not sending money to the federal government. Absolutely not. That money's staying in California because evidently Donald Trump. For those of you who don't know, California is the 5th largest economy in the world. Okay, California subsidizes the growth of literally every red state in America. Without California's money, these red states would be even more impoverished. And let me tell you something. You drive through the red states, they are third world countries. Their water's polluted. Their schools are already shit. Their teachers are stressed out and underpaid. It's a nightmare scenario. Pollution's everywhere. You drive through any like old sort of, main street or whatever, and the buildings are all boarded up. There's issues with drug addiction and drug abuse within those red states that are just, it is unfathomable. I mean, it really is criminal. Just how much the Republican-led state legislatures have failed their constituents. And yet their constituents, they either move out of the states, so then the Republicans are never held accountable, or they move to a district that's relatively blue. You know what I mean? So if they have to move to a bluer district because that's where all the resources are. You see how that works? So the red state politician is never punished because all their constituents just move out. And for 10 years, that politician gets to rest in that office because of gerrymandering, because of the way every 10 years, that's when we do the census, and that's when you get new congressional maps. So, you can have a politician who's run all their people out of town with shitty policies, and they get to stay in that seat. And you would think, well, why don't people just vote? And this is democracy. It's frustrating. It's difficult. If you have a solution to that problem, I'd love to hear it. You would solve everybody's problems. But red state politicians are not held accountable. They're just not. And they get to do whatever they want to do. They get to be as crazy as they want to be. They can ignore a coup literally happening in Washington, D.C. right now. And they can take services away from your children. If you live in a red state, you need to call your state politicians right now and get on their ass and tell them this is not acceptable.